What if the United States of America wasn't a permanent thing? Imagine the political cracks we see today widening into canyons, eventually tearing the country apart in a second civil war. Now, a modern American conflict wouldn't be a neat replay of the 1860s. I recently made another video on this that you can see here. There's no clean North versus South divide anymore. Instead, it would be a messy, chaotic, and deeply personal fight that would shatter the nation from the inside out. This is a thought experiment. We're not predicting the future, and while most experts agree the risk of a full-blown, hot civil war is low, exploring these what-if scenarios helps us understand the real-world fault lines that already exist. So let's explore 5 shocking ways the US could splinter into new nations from the ashes of the old. And before we jump in, if you're into fascinating and slightly terrifying thought experiments like this one, or you just want to learn general preparedness strategies and small unit tactics, make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell. First off, let's head to the West Coast, where a brand new nation declares its independence. Citing irreconcilable differences with the federal government, the states of Washington, Oregon, and California form a powerful coalition, the Cascadia California Bloc. This actually isn't just a fantasy. The Cascadia independence movement is a real-world concept, and in this future, it becomes a reality. This new nation is fueled by a desire to forge its own path on everything from climate change to social policy, things they feel are constantly under threat. Stretching from Canada to Mexico, this new country would immediately be a global economic giant. California's economy alone is one of the biggest in the world, but don't expect a clean break. While we think of California as a deep blue state, that political identity is really just concentrated on the coasts. The huge conservative regions in the Central Valley, the far north, and the eastern deserts would likely resist. They might even declare their loyalty to the old U.S., sparking a civil war within the brand new Californian Republic. And the federal government? It's not just going to watch this happen. You could easily see a scenario where the president threatens to send in troops, maybe even backed by the National Guard units from neighboring red states like Arizona and Idaho. This would ignite armed conflict along the new contested border, and the Cascadian Californian bloc would be squeezed, facing sanctions and maybe even a naval blockade of its critical ports in LA, San Francisco, and Seattle. It's a messy multi-front war that proves a key point. The real divisions in America run through states, not just between them. Our next scenario throws state lines out the window entirely. Instead, the country fractures along one of the deepest divides in American life, the one between the city and the countryside. In this future, the U.S. shatters into a patchwork of fortified city-states and self-governing rural zones. Think of major hubs like Denver, Chicago, and Atlanta becoming their own independent territories, while the vast rural lands around them dig in and form their own power structures. This split is just the physical conclusion of a political reality that's been brewing for decades. American politics is increasingly defined by population densities. Cities vote one way, and rural areas vote the other. If federal authority collapsed, that political gap would become a physical wall. Cities could use their own police forces to create defensive perimeters, becoming islands of federalism or progressivism. Outside those urban islands, a very different world would emerge. Rural militias, fueled by a deep distrust of urban elites, could blockade highways and cut off supply lines to the cities. The consequences would be catastrophic. Cities severed from the farms that feed them would face food and energy shortages within only weeks. At the same time, rural areas would lose access to the specialized hospitals, tech hubs, and financial centers that are all packed into the cities. It would create a landscape of brutal, localized siege warfare. Any government that still existed would be paralyzed, forced to choose between the populous cities or the vast armed territories of rural America. Our third scenario gets even more granular. Forget states. What if the fundamental building block of a new America was the county? In a total collapse of federal and state authority, loyalty shrinks to what you can see. In this future, individual counties with the right mix of wealth, resources, and social cohesion decide to go it alone, shattering states into a chaotic mosaic of micronations. This is not as far-fetched as it sounds. Across the U.S., counties wield significant power over local affairs, and some possess immense economic strength. In a collapse, a wealthy suburban county like Howard County, Maryland, which has strong local governing authority, could use its tax base and resources to become a self-sufficient enclave. Likewise, a resource-rich rural county in Texas or a farming community in the Midwest could declare its sovereignty, protecting its own food and energy. There are already dozens of county-level secession movements, with rural counties in states like Oregon and Illinois exploring ways to break away from the influence of large cities. This could create a bizarre and dangerous landscape. State lines would become meaningless, replaced by a patchwork of tiny, independent territories. Travel and trade would be a nightmare, as each county-state would have its own laws, its own militias, and its own allegiances. A county's power would depend on its ability to control a key highway, a water source, or a power plant, leading to a new, hyper-localized form of feudalism where your neighbor a few miles away is now a foreign power. But what if the breakup wasn't about politics at all, but something deeper? In our fourth scenario, the collapse of the government allows regions with strong cultural and ethnic identities to finally break away. This isn't about red versus blue, it's about self-determination. The map of America would end up looking less like a two-sided war and more like the complex, multi-sided conflicts that shattered places like the Balkans. In the Southwest, Hispanic communities that predate the United States itself could form an autonomous region to preserve their unique heritage. In the Southeast, the, quote, Black Belt, a region with a deep history and a large African American population, might declare independence to build a nation. And Native American nations, which are already sovereign, could decide to fully break away, reclaiming ancestral lands and exercising total self-governance. But this path would ultimately be incredibly dangerous. These emerging nations would have to fight for resources and defined borders against whoever is left of the state government or even against rival groups. In the darkest version of this future, the risk of ethnic cleansing and mass displacement, horrors we have seen in other fragmented societies, become terrifyingly real. To survive, these new enclaves might appeal for international recognition, turning America's domestic crisis into a global headache. Our final scenario isn't driven by ideology or identity, but by the oldest motivator there is: survival. When the government collapses, what's to stop regions with critical resources from hoarding them? This leads to the rise of resource republics, states that break away for purely economic reasons. Texas, with its incredible reserves of oil and natural gas, could decide it's better off alone, becoming the Republic of Texas, a new global energy superpower. The Midwest, America's breadbasket, could form its own confederation and use its control over the food supply as the ultimate bargaining chip. Even California could leverage the power of Silicon Valley to become a walled-off, technocratic state. Productive states that generate much of the country's wealth might finally ask themselves, why should we continue to foot the bill for everyone else? This would kick off a series of brutal trade wars. The new Republic of Texas might cut off fuel to the Northeast, which could retaliate by blocking Texan goods from its ports. Regions without their own resources, like the arid Southwest without water or the dense Northeast without power, would face immediate humanitarian crises. In this future, power doesn't come from an army, but from control over oil fields, farmland, and server farms. It's a world where new state lines might be drawn from local economies. So whether it's a coastal secession, a patchwork of city-states, or a war over resources, one thing is clear. A modern American collapse wouldn't be one single event. It would be a messy, layered fragmentation. The fault lines don't just run between states anymore, they run right through them, dividing cities from the countryside and neighbor from neighbor. These scenarios might be speculative, but they're all based on the real and growing divisions we see every day. So what do you think is the most likely scenario? Or do you see a totally different path to fragmentation? Drop your theories in the comments. We honestly love reading them. And if you enjoyed this journey into a potential future, do us a favor and like the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.